Call it. Call it. No, don't put it in your pocket. Don't put it in your pocket. Call it. Let's go. What's up? Tonight we're covering Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men, 2005 novel. And of course, oh, there goes the phone right away. And of course, blowing up here. And of course, we're covering the Coen brothers' 2007 film, No Country for Old Men. And this is, as you know, as I've said before, leading up to this, this is a sponsored stream from our homeboy, Jethro, who has graciously donated mega Kong bucks, mega Dugan coin, Dugan coin, mega Kong bucks, mega Gipper coin, mega Mises coin, and mega Dugan coin to sponsor this Coen brothers stream. So yeah, so the plan was to cover a bunch of Coen brothers movies, but I mean, look, as I sort of ruminated, as Norm Macdonald says, as I ruminated over the Coen brothers and which movie to cover, of course, I went straight to No Country for Old Men, because in my opinion, No Country for Old Men is their best film. And it's hard to say best, I mean, because, obviously The Big Lebowski is we're not covering The Big Lebowski because it's a different, it's obviously by itself, and because it's, that sort of ties into my thesis statement for this stream with No Country for Old Men. Okay, so let's get to it. All right, so tonight we're covering the 2005 novel and the 2007 film, and we're looking at the film, or rather we're looking at the novel through the lens of the film. And this is pretty interesting because we've covered Cormac McCarthy. We did Blood Meridian not too long ago. That was I think a really good stream. I mean, I enjoyed it. And this is a completely different work. And the reason that we're focusing so much on the source material and the text, not just because here at this channel, like I've said from the very beginning, we're looking at material in the we're looking at the text material, right? That's why it's Bayes' lit analyzer, right? But also because this is a completely different type of work than Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian, as we saw, is a Gnostic novel through and through. And again, for probably the best analysis, especially the best written analysis of Blood Meridian, you should go to Jay's analysis and check out his analysis of Blood Meridian as a Gnostic novel. And that ties into this novel in the sense that this is completely different. You may not know that the novel was written originally as a screenplay. McCarthy wrote it as a screenplay first, and then as a novel, and then the Coen brothers adapted it into the film. But for the most part, for I'd say about 3/4 of the book, it's true to the novel. The movie is true to the novel in like every sense. It's so cinematic. It's written in such a plain spoken, terse style. The imagery is replete. It's utterly cinematic, and that's actually one of the problems that that Harold Bloom found with analyzing the novel, that it was so different from, not just that it was so different from Blood Meridian. Obviously, it's a completely different work, but it sort of exists in the same universe, especially the end. The end of the novel, the end of the work is almost the exact same as Blood Meridian, the final paragraph of the book. But what I would say, my thesis statement here is that the Coen brothers have really, I don't know if this is a hot take. I'm sure other people, in their analysis of various Coen brothers movies have said this, but they focus in their films on absurdism, right? And there's sort of two. There's a flip side to that coin. What if you do got me boxed in? Because I will not hesitate. No, that's Michael Mann. There are sort of two sides to the absurdist view of the absurdist, I guess, worldview of the Coen brothers, and one, and this ties in with the McCarthy novel. One is a sort of a comedic absurdism where it's it's a juxtaposition of events, and they're sort of meaningless, and it leads to humor, right? And and you can see that best in works like The Big Lebowski and Burn After Reading, right? Where all of these events happen, and essentially they, as Bateman says at the end of American Psycho, this confession has meant nothing, right? They mean nothing. Remember at the end of Burn After Reading, at the conclusion of Burn After Reading with Brad Pitt, what happens in the movie? Just a quick wrap up of the movie is, we have various characters. We have John Malkovich, who's working for State Department. Really, he's working for intelligence. There's a computer file. Frances McDormand comes upon the computer file. Brad Pitt is a clueless mimbo who works at like a Planet Fitness or whatever, and with frosted tips, and George Clooney's in it and all this stuff and whatever. And then J.K. Simmons is working for intelligence. They bring him the file. A bunch of people die, and then at the end they say, "So what's the wrap?" And they say, "Oh, well, I don't know." And then they close the file, and then notice that the camera recedes, and it gives us a God's eye view of, I suppose, Langley, or at least the Eastern Shore, Northern Virginia, and then the plant, then the country, then the planet, and then space. And so our viewpoint is supposed to be that the events have sort of meant nothing, right? And that these people sort of died for nothing, right? And that's supposed to obviously mimic the fact that, or mirror the fact that a lot of the many of these operations have collateral damage and all that stuff, right? And then there's the other viewpoint, which is the sort of nihilistic absurdism, which is many people's view of No Country for Old Men, because the movie, the narrative, it progresses, but who are the good guys? We know who the bad guy is, but who are the good guys? And what happens, and does anything really change, especially in the larger context, of the narco state of 1980, or as we see it in the contemporary world, because that's what the world in which the story takes place. But I would say that, to go further, that really, if you're going to call it, right, and he has to call heads or tails, are we calling for, is our analysis of this work going to be one of absurdism or one of an apocalyptic view? And I would say that the work is an apocalyptic novel. And the reason I say that is because this will seem obvious to people watching this. You're like, duh. But Anton Chigurh is an antichrist character, not the literal Antichrist, but he is certainly a demonic character, an angel of death in every way. He's certainly a true psychopath. We talked about how in one of the last streams, how Iago is one of the true psychopaths of literature, and Chigurh is that, but even colder in the movie and in the book. And what's interesting is that the book especially, I mean, I've read the book once, and I've seen the movie, I don't know, 100 times. And I get something new, especially out of the movie, every time. I got to admit, like the first time it's amazing that this movie came out in 2007, and, not to spurg out or anything, but like the movie came out in 2007. It's filmed in Texas. It's filmed in, Marfa, Texas, or whatever. And of course, that's the first time I ever heard of Marfa, Texas. Shouts out to Marfa, Texas out there. And like a few miles away, they're filming There Will Be Blood, right? I abandoned my soy! I abandoned my soy, right? I drink your milkshake. Um, and, you know, so, but yeah, of course that was, you know, that's purposeful, and it's giving us this sort of Western or post-Western, meaning Wild West, vision of cinema and of the future, and of course of the present day. Because even though this book is set in 1980, it is now. I mean, it really, everything about it is now. In fact, there's a lot in the book that I didn't catch in the film. And when I say a lot, like I said at the beginning, that 3/4 of the book, I'd say about 3/4 of the, not to quantify it, but 3/4 of the book is like, is straight cinema. It's straight to the screen. But then there are these bits that aren't that they cut out, right? Obviously they cut out for the film. But some of them, like individual sentences, especially some of the sheriff, Tommy Lee Jones looking all craggly as hell. He's even more raspy than I am. And what he says about his, you know, he has these voiceovers and these conversations throughout the film and in the book. It's like a series of almost Michael Hare, Apocalypse Now voiceover style segments that, like, it's like a Greek chorus, right? And he's talking about the state of America, the state of society, the state of the world. And at one point he mentions that, you know, he says the world is going to hell in a handbasket, literally, right, in a sense, that everything is falling apart. It's all headed to hell. And he says that he doesn't think anything can stop this train. And I don't think that is it's not nihilistic, because there is a vision of what virtue means in the book and what to do about it. It's just that the characters don't do it. They are aware that this exists, but they don't do it. And it's partly because of Tommy Lee, like, for instance, Tommy Lee Jones, Sheriff Bell, his own weakness and his own mistakes. And there's there's so much in this book, because it's McCarthy and because it's Coen Brothers. It's rich. The text and the film are rich. And I would say that obviously we've got the narco state. We've got the military and military contractors play a huge role in this, which sort of goes by the wayside, especially like with the Woody Harrelson character in the film, which I'm going to get into. And the little scenes with Chigurh, I mean, Chigurh is, you know, Cormac McCarthy, I think, said that, you know, he chose what he said. You can never trust. So first of all, you can never trust, and I've said this from the beginning of this channel, you can never trust what the author, what the writer says when they're explaining the work, because, let me give you a reason why. We talked about T.S. Eliot a long time ago, and how when people would ask T.S. Eliot what he meant by certain lines of verse, he would simply read the text, right? And that is to say, basically, that I meant what I said exactly what I meant. I'm not here to interpret it for you. That's your job. That's your job as basement breathalyzing analyzers, right, to interpret it. Robert Frost, psychotic Robert Frost, would attempt to give an analysis and then would say something like, look, I'm just a farmer from New Hampshire. I don't know anything. I just wrote it, right? This aggression will not stand, man. You know, in the parlance of our times. Cormac McCarthy was asked about where he came up with the name Anton Chigurh. And his response was, well, I thought the name sounded good. And I thought it sounded cool. Now, that's a perfectly reasonable explanation. He doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't owe us, the reader, any explanation, because he's already written the words. The words are here. My interpretation is probably pretty obvious. I would say that first of all, he's Anton, because this is my sort of probably low IQ interpretation of this, but when I think of Anton, I think of first of all, he's first on the list, right? He's the alpha. He's obviously the alpha character in this. He completely dominates all of the characters, and that's the point, right? He's first. There are a bunch of scenes in this involving phone books. Have you noticed that? Especially in the film. Obviously because of the lack of cell phones, and he's always prying, tags off of cars. Everything's very tactile in the movie. He gets the screwdriver when he's out in the desert, and he pulls the VIN number off of the car. He uses the phone book, and he goes straight to Llewellyn's wife. All this stuff, but it's in a sense he's first in the phone book, and yet he's nowhere. He's everywhere and he's nowhere at the same time. And he's continuously referred to as a ghost. He's like a specter. And he truly haunts. He takes the form of Tommy Lee Jones's specter. He haunts him, like as in his past haunts him, because of something that he did in his past, which I'll get to, which is not in the film. Shigur simply reminds me of a chigger. He is a pest. He's a parasitic pest who's sort of, I don't know where you guys live, but out here in Appalachian, we got these things called chiggers, okay? And they're these little red little devil bugs, okay? And they get on you, in the grass, and they bite you, and you don't feel the bite until after it's already gone, right? So it's like he's everywhere, and it's when you meet him, it's already too late, and then he's gone, and nobody can find him, but he always finds you. And that's one of the things that Woody Harrelson's character says about him, that if you have to deal with him, it's already too late. He doesn't make deals. Also, his name being pronounced the way that it does sort of shows that he doesn't fit in. And it's interesting, there's a difference between the way that he's described in the book and the way that he's presented in the movie, because he's one of the great villains now, 15 years later. And he obviously cut a striking figure. He won the Oscar, cut a striking figure for this movie. He's got the haircut. He's got the weird haircut. His clothes don't quite fit right. He's wearing he's wearing clothes that look, he's wearing clothes that look too warm for the desert, right? He's got these sort of polyester deep browns on, and these jackets, and he just looks like he's got too much on. He looks like he's otherworldly, like he's mimicking a human being. He doesn't quite fit in. That's the way he is in every scene. The way that he, when he's in the scene with the old man, in the gas station, right? And the gas, that's an interesting scene because the Coen brothers are so good at staging their scenes. Because if you notice when he walks in, the old man, it's so obvious. The old man is standing there, and he's got the window with the desert behind him. It's like there's nothing there. And there are all these nooses behind him in the window. They're not literally nooses, but they look like nooses. And you're just thinking, that, this is like the hangman. The hangman has come to visit. And the way that Shigur eats the pistachios in the scene, and then puts one of the best scenes is he's eating the pistachios, he finishes, he's got the little plastic wrapper, he puts it on the counter, and the way that the wrapper expands. And it's like a 2-second shot, but it's so brilliant because it's so uncomfortable, and the sound of it. And notice that there's no music I don't think there's any music in the film. And that is great because it contrasts this shows why the Coen brothers are such masters of cinema, as opposed to someone like Christopher Nolan. And I'm not knocking Christopher Nolan, except for the fact that one thing that always bugs me about Christopher Nolan films is that every scene, especially in the Batman films, every scene tells you how to feel, right? The scene doesn't just, he won't just let the scene breathe and let the words or the script or the story speak for itself, or the action. He has to have this background music, and it's this, who does it? It's not Danny Elfman. It's what's the composer? You guys help me out. What's the composer for Batman? I can't think of it. Somebody will put it down. It's the music is this droning, sort of semi synthesized music, but it's not music, and it's just background music, and it's always like the scene. You remember the scene in I think The Dark Knight, where where um, Bruce Wayne has to hella parachute or whatever into the damn office building. Yes, Hans Zimmer. Thank you. Okay, the Kang out there. Shouts out to everybody watching. Appreciate you out there. And he has to get into the skyscraper or whatever, and it's like the scene is already tense enough, but it's not either it's not written well enough or it's not Han suck ass, says Jethro. Han Solo. Um and it just doesn't it's not written strongly enough where it can just happen on its own versus No Country for Old Men, where it's like the music is actually it's ironic because it's the music of silence, and silence is one of the strongest things in this in both the novel, which is interesting. You may ask, like, you're like, how is a novel silent? Well, because it's ellipsis, right? It's like the words that go unspoken, and the way that he shows, he doesn't tell us, and it's not through. He has very little exposition. Now, compared to Blood Meridian, I mean, the book. It's hard to compare the two because it's like apples and oranges, but they do exist like in the same sort of universe. But it's the book is not. It doesn't come close to Blood Meridian, but it's not really trying to come close. It's a totally different work. But in terms of fleshing out the worldview, it's a lot different. And I think part of that ties into the sort of apocalyptic notions of the silence. Let me read my note here. I wrote a note towards the end of the novel about silence. Let's see. There's the this is on page 203. Okay, so on page I'm skipping ahead, but I'm going to come back to the beginning. On page 203, it says, a bare formica and chrome table in the center of the room with a box of cereal standing on it, which is a sentence fragment. And excuse me, I'm sorry I'm coughing so much. And one thing that McCarthy does is he breaks the rules of writing and of literature purposefully. I mean, he's got poetic license, and so he's often writing in sentence fragments because he's trying to mirror or convey a fragmented world, right? So he says, a bare formica and chrome table in the center of the room with a box of cereal standing on it. A shadow of the kitchen window lying on the linoleum floor. He crossed the room and opened the refrigerator and looked in. He put the shotgun in the crook of his arm and took out a can of orange soda and opened it with his forefinger and stood drinking it, listening for anything that might follow the metallic clink of the can. He drank and set the half-empty can on the counter and shut the refrigerator door and walked through the dining room and into the living room and sat in an easy chair in the corner and looked out at the street. So this is Chigurh. Chigurh has gone into the house. This is towards the end of the novel. He's gone into the house of Llewellyn's wife, Carla Jean. At this point, Llewellyn, played by Josh Brolin in the film, is dead. The way he dies, by the way, is interesting because I don't want to say it's realistic or like naturalistic because we're far beyond that. We're in sort of a hyper meta reality, which is now, and it shows you that once Josh Brolin, Llewellyn Moss, decides to actively take part and get involved in this world, he has to accept the terms that are coming to him, and Chigurh will put that straight up to Carla Jean, his wife, and when he confronts her. So he breaks into the house. He's waiting for her to get back from, she's been away hiding, and then she finds out that he's dead. And earlier, Woody Harrelson has said to Josh Brolin, look, if you die, this guy will not stop. He will not, it's not even a question of him stopping. There's no chance that he's going to stop and he's going to eliminate the people that are involved with this. And because you have chosen to involve Carla Jean, your wife, and Carla Jean in the movie is great because she's played by the Scottish actress who made her debut in Trainspotting. Another one of my favorite movies, Trainspotting. And she is, I forget her name, but anyway, she comes in. She is one of the virtuous characters in the novel and one of the brave characters because, number one, she at points refuses to take the deal. Number two, she calls him out for. He says, "You got to call it," and she says, "I'm not going to call it. God wouldn't want me to." She's not interested in games of chance. He tells her that she doesn't have a choice. She has to call the coin toss. No matter what, she's going to die because he's the angel of death. But the silence aspect is interesting because he comes into the house and you can feel him opening this can of, Fanta or whatever, and he opens it. You can imagine you're in your house. It's completely silent. I think this is during the daytime. It's not at night. But let's say it's like, remember when if you did this, like you're a teenager, you snuck out of your house to hang out with your friends or something. You come back in, and you are you open the fridge. It's all quiet, and you take out a can of Coke or something, and you gotta pop it open, and how loud it is and how it echoes throughout the house. It's like a bomb has gone off, right? And even though he is the one who knocks, he is the one who's there. He's listening for a reaction in the house from something human because he's completely in tune. His senses are totally attuned to the breathing of the house. And so McCarthy doesn't need to tell us that. He simply shows us that through depicting the scene, and we can infer the rest. The silence is the optimal element. It's the silence of distances, right? Because the film, the film is set in Texas. This is all it's a Wild West story, but it's like post Wild West. It's like post Western and ultra violent in a globalist world, and it is globalist because it's multinational. It involves multinational drug trading. It goes back and forth across the border. Remember, Josh Brolin goes from where he's like in El Paso, then he goes to Juarez. He comes back. It involves conglomerates. It involves cartels. The silence of the desert, the silence of the dead. Silence of the dead is important because the dead are silent and only speak to Tommy Lee Jones essentially in his dreams. He talks about his father. The book opens with him talking about basically the silence of the aftermath of him watching the execution of a teenager that he had condemned to death because he's a sheriff and he went to the execution. The silence of Chigurh's weapon of choice, right, which is this bolt gun, which is silent in terms of it's not, he's not doing car bombs. Now, at one point, he does blow up a car, but that's purposeful because remember he's been shot by Llewellyn and he has to create a diversion, which is this loud explosion. At one point, another point, he shoots somebody and he explains as the guy is dying. He says, "Do you know why I used birdshot? I used birdshot because I didn't want the shell to, I didn't want the pellets to go through you and break the glass behind you and then fall in the street below and then attract attention." Right? So he shoots the guy in such a way that he will get hit. The glass, he'll remain silent and make his escape. The silence of the shotgun, he has a silencer or a suppressor on his shotgun, which is interesting. There's no music in the film. The silence between the bleeps on the transponder. So forgive me, I'm talking about the film as if everyone here's seen it. If you haven't seen it, I'm pretty sure everybody has. But if you haven't seen it, then watch the movie, and hopefully this analysis will help. But what happens is, maybe before I get too much deeper into this, I should give just a quick rundown of what this is about. I should have done that at the beginning. Sorry, guys, I'm so excited. Shouts out to everybody who's here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for Thank you for sponsoring this stream, Jethro. I really appreciate it. If you want to sponsor a stream, if you want me to do a movie analysis or a book analysis, if it's a movie analysis, then I would like it to be something literary, something based in a book, or at least that I can draw from. Then you can donate big time. And of course, I took this directly from our homeboy, David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, which means drop 100 Kong bucks in either PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo, and I will dedicate my. Now, listen, it's like, okay, yeah, we're only doing however long the stream is going to be. I don't know, 2 hours or whatever it's going to be, but consider that a lot of time. I've put a lot of time into it. I mean, I'm not saying that to, I love doing it, so it's fun for me. But I'm saying that that's where your donation goes because this takes a lot of reading, research, notes, writing, cross-referencing, and thinking. And that doesn't sound like it's work. It doesn't feel like work, honestly. This is fun. But if you want me to do that, then please drop a fat chat, and I appreciate it. Also, I want to give a shout out to Jack, who dropped 20 bucks, who has who has sponsored a music lyric stream. So I'll be doing that. He asked me to do I think a Thin Lizzy song and talk about. I have to go back and look at the message, but I'll be doing that because he dropped 20 bucks. So I appreciate that. And if you want me to do that, like a music lyric stream, I'll do that. Just drop me some fat chats and support me, and I really appreciate it. Enough of that. Thank you so much, guys. So what happens in the story is this. Basically, the movie, let's talk about it from the movie point of view. The movie begins, it's just like in the book. The movie begins with a voiceover from Tommy Lee Jones talking about this sort of pretty depressing fact that he's a sheriff, and he went back and in his memory, and he remembers going to view the execution of a teenager that he had condemned to death through his testimony. And basically, he says that the world is dark, and the world is dark, deep, and dangerous, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. Then we sort of cut to Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin, I gotta say, is really good in this movie. I really like Josh Brolin. And, Josh Brolin is the son of James Brolin, the 70s, 60s, and 70s actor. And, of course, we remember him from Goonies when he was a teenager. But I guess he sort of, if I remember correctly, like, this was the time when he, like, came back or made it as like his own actor, and he got a bunch of really great roles. Remember, he was in this in I think 2008. He played W. I thought he did a really great W. His Oliver Stone interpretation of W. And then of course later he was in Sicario. And then this has of course Javier Bardem as Anton Chigurh. It's got a great cast, and one thing that the Coen brothers do really well is cast background characters. Their background characters are so amazing. They're so memorable. They are like they're like they're like part of this otherworldly landscape. It's like these are the sort of people that you might see in real life and go, oh my God, these people are mutants. But they are like they're beautiful people, if that makes sense. Like cinematically, they just fit perfectly in the film. And one example of that is the woman that works at the hotel or the motel that Chigurh confronts, and is one of the few people to get away unharmed with her life. And it's because she is a sort of a metaphysical match for him because she doesn't play his game. And he senses this sort of strength that she has. It's weird. It's almost like we're watching an allegory. We're watching like, Dante go through the underworld, and we've covered Dante's Inferno, like, and he's going into the city of Dis, and he's meeting these various archetypes, right? What was another point I was about to make? Remind me to come back to The Big Lebowski and my thoughts on that, and absurdism, and Waiting for Godot, right, by Samuel Beckett. So I'll come back to that in a minute, because that's sort of the opposite of this. That is supposedly, that's an absurdist tale of sort of nihilism. This is a sort of a violent absurdist tale, but in an apocalyptic vein. So what happens is we see Llewellyn Moss, Josh Brolin. He is on the what's the word for it in Texas? Shouts out to Kim. Kim, help me out here. What's the word for it? The arroyo, maybe. I don't know. He's looking out on the prairie, and he's like gazelle hunting or something. He's gazelle hunting or something. And one thing that we noticed is that he is silent. We hear the sound of the wind. He takes his time. He's looking through the binoculars. And he's sighting the animals. He tests the wind. He shoots one of them. It is injured. He doesn't make a kill immediately, and then he's like shit. And then he has to pack it up and go. And the way that he does it though is interesting, because it's the little things. He takes off his boot. He puts his boot on a rock. He uses that as his to steady his rifle. After he takes his shot, of course, he picks up the shell and he puts it in his pocket. Everything in this is mirrored in the sense that every time the professionals will fire their weapon, they will collect their shells and they will put it in their pocket. And that's one reason why Chigurh, of course, for the most part, other than the shotgun, does not use a gun. He uses this bolt gun because there's no shell, right? And he can remain sort of anonymous and silent. Yes. So he goes out there, and when he's chasing the animal, he comes over on this like promontory, and he sees that there are a bunch of trucks outside, and he spies it for a while. He's very methodical, and then he sees that there are dead guys with weapons. He makes his way there, and notice that when he walks up, Josh Brolin he's like the tall man. He's like Gary Cooper or something. I mean, he's a real badass. He walks up, he's got this mustache, he's got his cowboy hat, and he's got his rifle slung. And he walks up, and he walks up to like an old Bronco, and he sees that everybody's dead. He opens the door, and he sees that the guy's alive, pulls the gun on him, takes the guy's pistol out of his waistband. He makes sure to collect all the weapons, which is so satisfying, because I'm sure every dude out there, when you watch a movie and the guy kills somebody and you know there's going to be bad guys, you're always like, dude, take the weapon, man. The guy's got an Uzi. Just take it. And that's exactly what he does. And then the guy says, Lobos. Hay lobos. And he says, no hay lobos. Ain't no wolves. Right? I think the guy's talking about coyotes. And then he says, agua. Necesito agua, or whatever. And he says, ain't no agua. Right? The guy's dying. And then Josh Brolin, of course, figures out, Llewellyn Moss figures out, he says, he finds a big old bag in the back of one of the trucks, and he opens it up. And of course, it's full of dope, as you would expect. This is obviously a cartel deal gone wrong. They're out in the desert. And there's a bunch of brown packages. There's a bunch of brown, right? A bunch of heroin out there. He leaves that, and he goes back to the guy, and he says, where's the last man? He basically says, where's the last man standing? Right? I think he says El Ultimo. And, he knows through however he knows it, this ain't no, naive guy. He knows that there's going to be one guy who made it, and that guy's going to have the cash. Guy says he doesn't know where he is, but of course Moss tracks him. This is interesting because it deals with his background, which we're going to figure out later because of the book. So he tracks him, and of course he's sitting under the tree of knowledge of good and evil up there on the hill. And he's died. The guy's dead. Of course, he goes up there and he spies him. and he's dead. He's got a briefcase up there. Either he's got a gold 9mm or he's got a Uzi. One of them's got a Uzi. Anyway, he collects the money. Then he goes on. He hightails it on back home. He hides the cash under his trailer. He goes inside. He meets Carla Jean, his wife. She's a great wife. She's kind of nagging him a little bit, but like in a nice, in a playful way. They obviously love each other. They're a young couple, right? And she's like, "Where you been?" And he's like, "I've been," or something like that, And he's got food on the table, and he has this sort of gruff attitude with everybody, especially in the book, and he's a little bit sarcastic, but it's his way. It's like he's obviously supposed to be the good guy, right? The movie is also it's a triptych, right? We've got three sort of supposedly equal characters. We've got Llewellyn Moss, right? Who, by the way, his name is chosen because it's a languid, euphonious name that indicates like sunlight, right? Like the light hitting the moss. Llewellyn, it's like a Welsh name. And it's also like lyrical. It's sort of uplifting. Then we've got Sheriff Bell, and that's Tommy Lee Jones's character. He's the old craggly sheriff, and the bell this isn't arbitrary. I'm not like making it up. I get this from, I think this is from allusions within the text where he is constantly talking about death and what he sees about death. And I take this to be like for whom the bell tolls, right? Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, right? The death knell. Especially because of a story that he tells about when he was in France during World War II, which I'll get to. And then, of course, we have Sugar, whose name etymology of his name I've covered. We also have Woody Harrelson, who pops up in the movie, who is an interesting character, a side character, and I'll get to him. So he hides the money, and then he falls asleep. He's with his wife, falls asleep, and then in the middle of the night he wakes up, and his conscience calls him, and he says agua. So he gets some water, and he goes back, and he's going to take the man the water because he knows there's a dead man out there. There's a dead man out there with no water. So he takes the man the water, but while he's out there, of course, he sees headlights in the distance, and he goes, "Oh fuck," because this is one of the sides of the cartel out there investigating what happened. They spot him. Of course, his truck, he didn't park far away enough, and they see his truck. Then they go down. They put the overhead lights on him, the floodlights, and then they release this old pit bull that comes. It's a great scene. The pit bull runs after him. He runs. He gets away. He runs into, I guess, whatever it is, the Rio Grande. Runs into the river. He kind of strips down as fast as he can, except for his I think his 9mm. He jumps into the water. He swims. This damn pit bull catches the current and swims right after him. And right up to the last minute, I mean, he gets out. He takes out his pistol, takes out the clip, blows on it, drives it, and then right when the pit bull's coming to kill him, I mean, this gnarly looking pit bull, he shoots it, right? And he survives, but he's got he's wounded. He's got I don't know if he got bitten, but he's certainly been wounded, and then he gets away. Now, what happens next is essentially that we see Chigurh, and Anton Chigurh he's been arrested, and we find out in the book why he's been arrested, because that's a question you may not have thought to ask watching the film. The film starts with him in the custody, right, of this sheriff, and he goes into the sheriff's office, and of course, the guy's like, he's got his back to Chigurh. Big mistake. "Oh, I think I got somebody here, Sheriff. Yeah, he ain't got no name on him," or whatever. And Chigurh, of course, is handcuffed behind the back, slips under his handcuffs under his legs, comes up, strangles the guy, jumps backwards, and then we see that really disturbing scene of him strangling the guy from behind, and the aftermath is all the scuff marks on the ground. And the scuff marks are interesting because it's almost like the visual representation of both the like ubiquitous shadow that Sugar casts over this whole landscape, the floor of the office, but also this sort of desert floor. He's everywhere, and also like these sort of like skid marks, streak marks of like the stains of death that he causes everywhere, right? And what he does is he gets up, he takes off the handcuffs, he's cool, calm, and collected. He washes his cut wrists off in the sink. He gets his gun. He goes off. He gets his bolt bolt gun. The bolt gun is if you don't know what I'm talking about, is like it's an oxygen tank with it's a tube with like a bolt that they use in the slaughterhouse to slaughter cattle, right? And he takes the police car. He pulls the guy over. This hapless boomer pulls him over. So sir, can I ask you to step out of the vehicle? The guy steps out of the vehicle. Well, I don't know what I was speeding for, officer. And it's like, dude, this guy's not in uniform. Do not get out of the car. And he says, can you just stand right here? He puts it right up to his head. It's interesting that he puts it right up to his head because it's saying that these human beings are cattle for Shigur, right? He is the slaughterer. He is the predator. And it's also interesting that he is literally putting his stamp in their forehead, right? Because if he's this Antichrist character, later on, he's referred to as, Bell will refer to him as Mammon. I mean, he talks about Mammon at the end of the book. And he's not just talking about the worship of money, he's talking about the demon Mammon. And Shigur is this sort of agent. Shigur really is a Ronin. I mean, that's why he's not like a strict Antichrist. I guess he's more of a Beelzebub character, but he's certainly an angel of death. But he's a Ronin looking for a master. And, but he is putting his satanic 666 murder, death, kill stamp on the foreheads of all of his victims. And then when Bell shows up, he's like, we did the forensics. We can't find a bullet in the guy's brain. He's like, what? And that's another indication that Shigur is like this ghost, because even his method of execution is ghost-like. How can you shoot a guy in the head? He couldn't go in and pry the bullet out. There's no trauma marks. There's no cordite. It's just a hole in the guy's head. So that really freaks him out. And of course, then we know that he's got this really bizarre murder weapon, right? He's a serial killer, but he is in the employ of both himself and we're still, hey, what's up, sis? We're still on No Country for Old Men. And she's hot tubbing, jealous. And so that's interesting because one of the things that this does is it shows it gives us an insight into the various characters within the book and their backgrounds. So, for example, if we were to have characters like, for instance, Llewellyn Moss or Josh Brolin, who, he's out hunting, he shoots, he just does what every hunter does, and he takes his shot and he goes about his business. He would just be a typical normal guy. But we see that there's something different about him. Later on, when he's having a conversation after he has been in a shootout with Shigur, we learn from Woody Harrelson's character who shows up that he was in the 12th Infantry. He was in, and then of course Woody Harrelson says that he himself was in Special Forces. He was a colonel, and that he now works for people who like to keep a low profile. In other words, he is a military contractor or an ex-military contractor who has a particular set of skills, especially finding and eliminating people, which is all too common even now. I mean, that's obvious now, right? Not a theory, but we don't know that much about Josh Brolin. We find out at the end of the novel which is not in the film, I don't think, but in the end of the novel, we find out through his parents because Bell goes to visit his parents, went to tell them that he's dead, and they say he served, he served 2 tours in Nam. He was part of 12th Infantry, and he was a sniper, and he was the best marksman, best crack shot anybody's ever seen, which is why he is able to survive in his brief battles with Shigur. In fact, he is the only one to survive in an actual physical bout with Shigur. And in fact, Shigur does not even remember. Shigur doesn't even kill him. He's killed through outside circumstances in the greater context of this narco war because he's at a motel and the other side of the drug deal gone wrong from the beginning of the film shows up at the motel. They've also tracked him to take the money. So back to what happens, how Brolin runs into trouble is that he doesn't realize that in the cash that he's taken, which is like $2.4 million, he doesn't realize that there's a transponder in there. And one of the things about the transponder that's also, that deals with this motif of silence that I was talking about is that Shigur is this like otherworldly tracker. He's a tracker on the other side from Woody Harrelson. And what he does is he finds the transponder when he goes down to investigate himself. When he goes to investigate the drug deal gone wrong, he finds the transponder. And remember, this is 1980. So the only way he has of it working is like to drive around all of Texas and it'll bleep if he's anywhere in whatever radius. And that's all he does. He just drives around in silence like this night crawler until he hears a bleep. And then he just goes with it until finally he comes upon him and he finds him. And it's really insane because what Shigur states is that essentially that the reason that he got arrested was purposeful. He states that, okay, so this is my like true take on the film. Get ready for my hot take. My true take on the film is that if I've ever seen a movie or read a book that does this better, I can't remember one, where we often read about, or we often hear about the Gnostic themes, this constant Gnostic theme that pops up in literature and film, right? It's over and over and over. Duality, balance, all this stuff. Transcendence through. We've covered this a million times, okay? But one thing that this does differently is Shigur is the embodiment of the Crowleyan will in unlike anything I've seen in film or literature in terms of what the character himself says in the book. He says that. He doesn't say Crowley, but he says that he got arrested because he wanted to test his will. And what I mean by that, we've covered the book Will by G. Gordon Liddy, which is like it's like a whole different, it's funny because there is a correlation. Because remember in that book, and in real life, Gordon Liddy talked about how he would, use this sort of NOTSEE triumph of the will, and he like overcame his fears by, holding a lighter under his skin until it melted and not showing pain and all that stuff. But what Shigur does is he says he wants to test if he could put himself in circumstances under which any person could not escape, and to see if he can make his way out. And that's exactly what he does, and he triumphs. And what that tells him, and the reason he does that is because he has existed in this pure, and when I say pure, I mean impure, obviously, but I mean pure in the sense of he has no scruples. He is absolutely ruthless. He is absolutely evil. He completely subverts all the normal rules of morality, but he has a code. and his code is one of pure will, in the sense that his freedom in the book, and he knows this, his freedom is that he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. And that is what this sort of idea of Crowleyan freedom means, which is, where does it lead? It leads to murder, loss of life, loss of value, degradation, and hell. And he specifically mentions that. He even mentions when he talks to Carla Jean, and Carla Jean says to him, she says to him, "You are a blasphemer." This was amazing. I did not remember this in the film, but it occurs in the book. When he confronts her, this is the last person that he confronts in the book. He confronts Carla Jean, and he says, "Call it. This is the best chance you're going to get. I'm going to let you call it for your life." And the thing is that the thing about Anton Chigurh is that it's interesting is that he's different from other villains in books because there's no lying in him. Remember that scene in Scarface where Sosa says to Tony, "I like you, Tony. I like you, Tony. There is no lying in you." Right? You remember that? Well, that is exactly what Chigurh is. There's no lying in him. Because he has no need to lie. He has no need to lie. He doesn't need to accuse. He doesn't need to worm his way out of anything, because that doesn't make it better. It makes him more ruthless, and it makes him more in line with he is the most Crowleyan, Luciferian, Antichrist as a human villain that I can remember. We could just say, okay, he's a straight psychopath, right? But he sort of mimics, human emotions. He mimics like what it means to be a human. In the book, one of the things is that you remember in the film, right after Carla Jean, this is at the end of the movie, he actually is a victim of his own sort of discussion about fate, right? And about how all of your life has led you to this moment, because he himself unwittingly flips a coin. He's driving along, he comes to a stoplight, and he goes through the stoplight, and he's hit by a car. And the car in the book is described as having, it doesn't stop at all. It comes out of nowhere, and it hits him. And he accepts this, right? He's injured, and then he's confronted by these two boys, and he says, he offers them money, and he says, "Give me your shirt," because he's got to tie up his wound. And then he hobbles his way off, and he leaves, and he escapes because he lives. So the bad guy in the book and the movie lives, of course. That's why I titled it "The Most Invincible Man," because, well, I'll come to that in a second. But he's sort of a victim of this. Wait, hold on. I realize I'm going sort of all over the place, you guys, but there's so much in this. One of the things that Woody Harrelson says when he confronts Llewellyn Moss in the hospital after he's gone through this battle and survived with Chigurh is, he says, "Do you have any idea who's after you?" And he says, he's like, "No, I don't know." And he's like, "Well, you would want to meet him. That's why I'm here. And we used to work together." And then Josh Brolin says, like, "What are you friends with this guy?" And he says, "No, we were associates." And he says, "Are you afraid of him?" And Woody Harrelson says, "Wary would be the more appropriate word," which is accurate. He's not afraid of him because they were sort of on the same level. They were associates of one another. And yet, he's wary of him because he knows he can't cross him. He says, "How would you describe him?" And he says, and the way that he describes Chigurh is so perfect. He says, "He's a man without a sense of humor," which says everything. He is straight to the point. He is completely psychopathic. He has no room at all for anything getting in his way. That doesn't mean that he's going to go around, killing people randomly. He does do that. But notice that it's also not random. It's and this doesn't excuse it, obviously. I'm just saying in the worldview of the film. I mean, this guy's sick. But like when he kills the guy, when he carjacks him, basically, it's because he's in his way. He kills Carla Jean because she's an associate um, of the guy who ripped him off. Everybody that he kills is like is like in his line of sight, and that's one of the one of his like life themes that he talks about. How um, I've been on a trajectory. Nothing will get in my way. Just like you've been on a trajectory and you didn't know it and you ended up here. Now, that's slightly different from what you might think of as like causation. I mean, he's not saying like, you know, it's a domino effect that led you to here. And it's not quite fate. It's more like that he's on a trajectory and that anybody who ends up in his path is going to meet this. I don't know if you would call it fate, but they're going to meet this sort of end. But the description of him from the two boys, because they describe what he looks like to Belle, because he finds out that he left his pistol behind, and he tracks the pistol to the boys, and the boys say, "Yeah, I found it. It was this guy who was in this car wreck." And Belle says to him, like, "Do you know who that guy is and how many people he killed and how lucky you are that you survived?" And they're kids, and they're like, "No, we don't know." And then when they describe him, they say, he how tall was he? They say, "I don't know, medium." What did he look like? They say, he was kind of dark. They say, "Was he Mexican?" He says, "No." What did his clothes look like? They were like regular. What did his hair look like? It was just regular. In other words, he has like no, he's the gray man, right? He's like there's nothing distinguishable, sorry, about him. He exists on the outer rim of society, and he's able to fit in anywhere. And just like you're walking through the grass and you get bit by this chigger and you didn't see it. This guy is like everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But in the movie, notice that the Coen brothers do something actually brilliant. They actually make him. They change it because they make him a sort of an otherworldly figure. I think the quote was they said they wanted him to look like that he came from Mars. Now that's interesting because you don't want this psycho. If you're casting the guy and you're doing the costumes, you don't want the guy to look like some outlandish like buffoon character completely, because then he'll stand out too much and people will be able to identify him. But you do want his traits to be distinguishable enough that we remember that there's something off about him, which is why his haircut in the movie is like weird. It's like it is kind of buffoonish, but it's like he's attempting to look hip for 1980, but he doesn't. He just looks off. His clothes are too warm for the desert. The way that he eats is too imitative of a human being. The way that he talks is like too deliberate and too slow. His facial expressions and his mannerisms, it's like he's learning to mimic how a human being should talk, but he's not quite right. And that's what makes him both psychopathic in terms of his physical characteristics, but also demonic. I mean, the guy is like, it's like he's a demon inside the shell of a human being who's just intent on not only, I wouldn't say it's annihilation. He doesn't want to annihilate people. He wants to obliterate people. And I think the difference in terms of, I guess, etymology would be that he doesn't just want to make people into nothing in terms of not be alive. He wants to obliterate them in terms of their soul, as if they never had a soul in the first place, which gives him this sort of godlike quality for himself. And when he's talking to Carla Jean at the end, he says this thing about, she calls him a blasphemer, and then he says, let me see if I can find it. He says that he even admires God because, okay, okay, here it is. I'm going to read you some of this scene. Yeah, he says, I don't think so. Even a non believer might find it useful to model himself after God. Very useful, in fact. Right? Which is to say that he's a demon. I mean, this guy's he's like, he wants to be this God character. She says, you're just a blasphemer. Yeah, you tell his ass, Carla Jean. Tell him. He says, hard words, but what's done cannot be undone. I think you understand that your husband, you may be distressed to learn, had the opportunity to remove you from harm's way, and he chose not to do so. He was given that option, and his answer was no. Otherwise, I would not be here now. You aim to kill me, she said. He says, I'm sorry. And then he says, I see your look. It doesn't make any difference what sort of person I am, you know. You shouldn't be more frightened to die because you think I'm a bad person. Because you think I'm a bad person. He doesn't say that he is not a bad person. Of course he knows that. But the good and the bad is irrelevant to him. It doesn't matter to him. He's like, as Kurt says in Apocalypse Now, I'm above your petty lying morality. He says, she says, I knowed you was crazy when I seen you sitting there. I knowed exactly what was in store for me, even if I couldn't have said it. Sugar smiled. It's a hard thing to understand, he said. I see people struggle with it, the look they get. They always say the same thing. He always does that creepy, sick thing where he looks in people's eyes when he kills them. And then he says to her, call it. He says, call it. Yes, you will call it. She says, I won't do it. Call it. You will call it. She says, God would not want me to do that. He says, of course he would. You should try to save yourself. Call it. This is your last chance. Heads, she said. He lifted his hand away. The coin was tails. I'm sorry. She didn't answer. Maybe it's for the best. She looked away. You make like it was the coin, but you're the one, she says. Good call. In other words, you're the one doing the choice. Don't act like it's, 50-50, up to fate, up to chance, because you're the one who put me in the situation in the first place. And let's see. He says it could have gone either way. She says the coin didn't have no say. It was just you. Perhaps, but look at it my way. I got here the same way the coin did. She sat sobbing softly. She didn't answer. He says, I had no say in the matter. Every moment in your life is a turning and every one a choosing. Somewhere you made a choice. All followed to this. The accounting is scrupulous. The shape is drawn. No line can be erased. I had no belief in your ability to move a coin to your bidding. How could you? A person's path through the world seldom changes, and even more seldom will it change abruptly. And the shape of your path was visible from the beginning. She sat sobbing. Yet, even though I could have told you how all of this would end, I thought it not too much to ask that you have a final glimpse of hope in the world to lift your heart before the shroud drops, the darkness. Do you see? She says, oh God. She said, oh God. He says, I'm sorry. And then he says, you're asking that I make myself vulnerable, and that I can never do. I have only one way to live. It doesn't allow for special cases. A coin toss, perhaps. In this case, to small purpose. Most people don't believe that there can be such a person. Which do you get how that's the Crowleyan will? That he's trying to embody this. He's like Francis Dollaride or something in Red Dragon, right? He's trying to, your son is changing. He's trying to be this, maybe he is this demon, right? And he says, most people don't believe that somebody like me could exist who lives a pure will, right? In this sense of pure freedom, pure liberty, meaning resulting in the freedom of annihilation, the freedom of obliteration, of course, of everyone else, except for himself. And he's probably, he's probably okay with the terms that, that it will meet for himself. But in the end, um, one thing that's interesting is that in the end of the book, he collects the money. He finally collects the money and he returns it to the bosses. And of course, he has eliminated, by the way, all of the narcos that got in his way. Even though they think that he's working for them, he still eliminates them. And of course, Woody Harrelson made a good point. He's like, he would probably kill you just for the inconvenience, just for inconveniencing him, right? In other words, like he thinks nothing of it. You're like just a beast to him, whereas he is like the capital B beast. But what he does at the end is he gives the money to back to the head narco or whatever, which by the way is an American, and of course, and he says here's $2.4 million minus the money that the guy spent that stole it, minus my expenses. It's accounted for like to the T. In other words, money is not important for him. I saw some other analyses of this movie, and it was like some people make the mistake. It's fine that they did this, but they try to make the mistake of like finding the motivation for Anton Chigurh. They're like, what motivates him? Like, why does he kill? Why does he do the things that he does? Is he motivated by money? What does he like killing? And that's not like really a question in this. It's not whether he likes or dislikes something. He has no like, I mean, can you see that he has no like personal, the only time when he shows any like sort of emotion in the film is the first time he kills somebody, which is that sheriff. And it's like he kind of has a look of like demonic glee on his face, but it's really just one of excitement because of course he falls backwards, right? And he's like on the ground amongst the death scuff marks on the ground. He's like wallowing in the midst of his own murders. So of course he's sort of like wallowing, or he's like relishing his own actions, and it's like a moment of like unification of like his will and his pure ego in this demonic act, right? And he's also notice that he's also he is strangling the guy, so it's expiration, right? He's expiring the guy. It's the opposite of like the divine act of inspiration, of the breath of God. He's taking it away because he's this demon guy. But the rest of the film, he doesn't show any. There's no like emotional impact. There's no liking or disliking. There's no like, when he goes in and he goes into the house and he like drinks the glass of milk. He's not doing it because he's like wants to taste milk or he's thirsty. He's doing it because everything has a purpose for him, and he's sitting there and he's like wondering, how long was this milk here? What did it taste like when the person was here? What was their life like, so that I can now try and inhabit their body so that I can track them better. There's no like emotional involvement in it. And his like when he gives the money to the narco guy at the end, what he's really saying is he says to him, here's the money. I work for you now. I'm telling you I'm working for you. And your mistake was that you hired a number of people to do one person's job. You should have gotten me to do the one job. I'm the single sharp tool that you needed to do this. I've eliminated all those other people. I've eliminated all the extraneous, useless things in your organization. And now this is the way it's going to run. And I'm going to put you in touch with people who are going to help us run a more efficient organization. So we don't know who exactly he's working for, but he is a sharp instrument for whoever will hire him because that's his toolkit. Does that make sense? And we can see that he's sort of like a Ronin, right, without a master, and he's searching for one. His ultimate goal, we can assume, is that he will be his own master, or that, of course, he's serving Satan. So, a couple other things. When I'm going to go through this scene, let's see. There's a scene where, so Woody Harrelson's interesting in the movie because he is a Green Beret Special Forces colonel, who was in Nam. We can assume he is like either, he was probably tied in with something dealing with what do you Kunsaw, Shan State, Alfred McCoy, Lansdale, Golden Triangle operations. Right, he's a Green Beret in Nam. So then he shows up and he's looking for, Nam's over and he's looking for who can pay him for his special set of skills. So, of course, he is contracted to one of the cartels. His job is to track people, find people, and be an enforcer. And they talk about that after Shigur shoots him. After they have this conversation and he kills him, the speaker talks about how in the moment of death, Woody Harrelson's character sees all of the victims in his mind that he has, killed. He sees the people on the roadside in Nam. He sees the people he's blowtorched. He sees all the victims that he's shot at the behest of the cartel. He sees all the debts he's collected. Shigur sees this almost as this like gross, grisly, like almost like he's reading the, like he's scrying or like he's looking into the intestines of the animal that he slaughtered, because he's looking into the brain matter and the blood after he shot him in the head, and of course he shot him through one eye, of course. And one of the things it says is that Woody Harrelson saw the CHILD that he killed in Nam. So that's, if that's not like a Phoenix Program-esque activity, there's no reason why it wouldn't be, right? But what he says to the American cartel guy, the American side of this drug deal gone wrong, is the guy says, "Who is this Shigur guy?" And Woody Harrelson says on page 141, "Somewhere in the world is the most invincible man, just as somewhere is the most vulnerable." The guy says, "That's a belief that you have?" He says, "No, it's called statistics." "Just how dangerous is he?" Wells shrugged. "Compared to what? The bubonic plague? He's bad enough that you called me. He's a psychopathic killer, but so what? There's plenty of them around." In other words, I'm also a psychopathic killer, but he's not as psycho as he thinks he is, which is what I say that because that's what Shigur later says. He says, there have been a lot of people over the years. There have been a lot of people in my line of work who thought they were cut out for this, but they weren't. And so they were cut out. He cut them out because none of them match his sense of pure murderous energy. Do you get what I'm saying here, y'all? Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that this guy is the truest type of villain. I mean, he is like, he totally fits into this paradigm of military, narco state, Wild West. It's like this, we have this convergence of all these forces, especially in the contemporary world. And at one point, Bell, Tommy Lee Jones, is pontificating on how drugs have, rotted society, and he says something like, if Satan ever could harness something that would totally degrade the human spirit, it was narcotics. I disagree in the sense that there are other elements that are, even in the book, that are far worse, namely the worst thing, which is the thing we can't mention, but is the CREEPER thing, which is the absolute poison, right? But when he says that, when he says that, it's interesting because this sort of plays into, obviously this is relevant now. I mean, this is so relevant now with all of these things sort of being the prism through which we see these conflicts taking place in the current world. And let me go to, let me read you another passage here. I'm referencing the book so much because it's like having the script, the apocalyptic versus the absurd. This is chapter 6 on page. They mention Uvalde, which is interesting. It says, chapter 6, I wake up sometimes way in the night, and I know as certain as death that there ain't nothing short of the second coming of Christ that can slow this train. I mean, you know, Bell is pretty based in a number of ways throughout this thing, right? He's saying that, like, the world is so bad, so many things are happening. There's one point at the end. Okay, I got to read you this passage because he says he says he was in church with his wife, and okay, here it is. This is the last chapter, chapter 12. Oh, notice that there are 12 chapters in the book. What does that mean? Oh no, hold on. There's 13. I was going to say, okay, there's an extra chapter. 12 chapters in the book would indicate, remember that, like, when we get 12 chapters or 12 books, it's sort of indicative of the epic, right? We either have 12 or 24, right? With the Odyssey, with Scarlet Letter, a lot of the classical works will have sort of 12 books. And then we have this extra one tacked on at the end because of the what it's saying about the ominous view of the way that the world's headed. And what does it say here? He says, money, what do we think is going to come of that money? Money that can buy whole countries. It done has. Can it buy this one? I don't think so, but it will put you in bed with people you ought not to be there with. It's not even a law enforcement problem, which is interesting because he's a law enforcement officer and he realizes that everything he's doing is completely useless, right? He says people don't just jump up and decide to dope themselves for no reason by the millions. I don't have no answer about that. In particular, I don't have no answer to take heart from. I told a reporter here a while back, young girl, that she was just trying to be a reporter. She said, Sheriff, how come you let crime get so out of hand in your country? Sounded like a fair question, I reckon. Maybe it was a fair question. Anyway, I told her, I said, it starts when you begin to overlook bad manners. Anytime you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the end is pretty much in sight. I told her, I said, it reaches into every strata. You've heard about that, ain't you? Every strata. You finally get into that sort of breakdown in mercantile ethics that leaves people setting around out in the desert dead in their vehicles, and by then it's just too late. He says, now this sounds like the ramblings of an old guy going, oh, people are not saying yes sir and yes ma'am, and that's the end of the world, and that's, you know, and people would say that's ridiculous. But listen to what he says. He says the other thing is the old people. And I keep coming back to them. They look at me, it's always a question. Years back, I don't remember that. I don't remember it when I was sheriff back in the 50s. You see them and they don't even look confused. They just look crazy. That bothers me. It's like they woke up and they don't know how they got where they're at. Well, in a manner of speaking, they don't. At supper this evening, his wife, told me she'd been reading St. John the Revelations. Anytime I get to talking about how things are, she'll find something in the Bible, so I asked her if Revelations had anything to say about the shape things was taken, and she said she'd let me know. I asked her if there was anything in there about green hair and nose bones, and she said not in so many words there wasn't. I don't know if that's a good sign or not. Then she come around behind my chair and put her arms around my neck and bit me on the ear. She's a very young woman in a lot of ways. If I didn't have her, I don't know what I would have. Well, yes, I do. You wouldn't need a box to put it in either. In other words, what's he saying, you guys? He's saying that the little things and the degradation of society, right, lead to the state that we're in. There's this, you got to hear this other part that he says right before that when he's talking about church. He says, Um, First of all, he says you can't go to war without God. In other words, this country, he says, doesn't have God. He says on page 298, he said that if you don't follow the law, right and wrong won't. He said that if you don't follow the law, right and wrong won't save you, which I guess I can see the sense of, but it don't change the way I think. Finally, I asked him if he knew who Mammon was, and he said, Mammon? Yes, Mammon. You mean like in God and Mammon? Yes, sir. Well, he said, I can't say as I do. I know it's in the Bible. Is it the devil? I don't know. I'm going to look it up. I got a feeling I ought to know who it is. He kindly smiled and said, you sound like you might be getting ready to take up a spare bedroom. Well, I said, have you ever heard of this guy? He says he's pretty much a ghost. And then he says he goes to church, and this woman is complaining to him about how the country is going to hell because she says this thing about the right wing and the left wing, and he says, I don't know nothing about the right wing and the left wing, but this country don't seem like it's going in the right direction. And then the woman says she's worried because she thinks that her granddaughter's going to grow up in a country that won't let her get an ABROTION. And he says, lady, if you're worried about that, I don't think you need to be worried about that. It seems like we're already going to hell anyway. That's pretty crazy, right? That's in the book. Let's see. Another passage here. Yes, he talks about how, oh, I can't read that. That'll trigger the algo. Let's read the passage talking about the ruthlessness of Shigur. Let's see. Okay, this is page 182. So this is when Josh Brolin says, we got all this money. Carla Jean says, Lou Ellen, I don't even want the money. I just want us to be back like we was. We will be. She says, no, we won't. I thought about it. It's a false god. He says, yeah, but it's real money. And then, let's see. He gets the call, or no, he calls Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson's already dead. Shigur picks up the phone, and he says, I think I got the wrong number. Shigur says, you don't have the wrong number. You need to come see me. Who is this? You know who it is. Moss leaned on the counter, his forehead against his fist. Where's Wells? He can't help you now. What kind of a deal did you cut with him? I didn't cut any kind of deal. Yes, you did. How much was he going to give you? I don't know what you're talking about. Where's the money? What did you do with Wells? Shigur says, we had a difference of opinion. You don't need to concern yourself about Wells. He's out of the picture. You need to talk to me. And then the thing is, then that Josh Brolin tries to put up a good fight. He's one of these people who tries to put up a good fight, and he does. What he does is he wounds Shigur, and he almost I don't know if he almost kills him, but he wounds him such that he has to do surgery on himself. And Woody Harrelson says, did you kill him? And he says, no, I wounded him. He says, you didn't kill him. You didn't kill him, and he's going to come after you. And then Josh Brolin says, like, maybe I'll go after him. And he says, you won't. And he says, why not? And he says, because if you were, you would have already done it, and you wouldn't have said it. That's the difference between you and Shigur, right? Shigur is not going to tell you what he's going to do. And in fact, when he does tell him what he's going to do, he says, I'm going to get the money. And Wells says, Wells says, how are you going to get the money? And he says, it's going to be brought to my feet, which ties in with what we were just reading about what Bell said about Mammon, right? because in a way he is this demon Mammon, because the money will be brought to him like tribute. Now he also has his own master, and he's going to take the money to the cartel guy. But it's interesting how the metaphysical language plays such a strong role in this, and you don't really get that in the film so much if you don't pay attention to the script and you don't pay attention to the words they're saying. And that's not a bad thing about the film. I mean, that kind of makes it great because it's so subtle. Because again, the movie is so well done because it's like the shots are framed in such a way, and the overall atmosphere is such that you're ensconced in the story, and it's a terrifying movie. It's really scary. It's also funny. I mean, it's also, you can't help but laugh. And like, again, like, look at some of these characters, you guys. Like the Coen brothers. I mean, this right here. This lady is so amazing because remember that with Shiger, only a few people survive the fight. Like they survive an encounter with him. Very few people. There's the boys. By the way, the boys who give Shiger the shirt at the end after he's in the car wreck. The language in the book is tied in with. You guys remember? Have you guys heard of the story of the boys on the tracks? I don't know how much I can say here because of the algo, but the boys on the tracks is the Larry Nichols. Remember, Larry Nichols told about the boys on the tracks, and what happened was, just to give a recap, if you guys don't remember it, is in Mena, Arkansas, right in the 80s, when a certain person was the governor, and they were making the drops and Barry Seal and all that stuff. One night, apparently, there were two regular teen kids who were like hanging out at night, and they were like shooting BB guns and stuff like that, and they witnessed something, and supposedly they witnessed probably a drop, and then a deal between the Narcolombians and the American or the intelligence apparatus, right? Which again is interesting in this book and the movie because, the normie idea of this is always that, and this plays out in the news every time, which is like, oh, the bad things happen because the people came from outside the city and they were the ones who caused trouble, or they were foreigners and they came here and did it. But, once they're gone, right, there will be no more RIOTS, or there will be no more whatever it is, right? Or, once we get rid of the supply from the other country, then there won't be any more of that. But if you watch any of these films, or you read any of the history, or read any of the white papers, I mean, who do you think is running the operations? Like, remember that movie, the Ridley Scott movie, which is also, interestingly, Cormac McCarthy wrote the screenplay for this. It's called The Counselor. Really dark movie because it involves 8 millimeter stuff. Michael Fassbender is a lawyer. He is a lawyer for the cartel. Javier Bardem is also in that. He's a cartel guy. Penelope Cruz is the wife of Michael Fassbender, and Cameron Diaz is this, Colombiana, drug lord woman or whatever. And because he ends up being the one with his name on a shipment that goes missing, a huge shipment, they come to collect, and they take Penelope Cruz and they do 8 millimeter stuff, and then they send him the tape. You remember that? But notice that the bad guys in that are not the outsiders. It's the Americans who are, or at least the intelligence apparatus, right? Or the intelligence state without without borders, without portfolio, that are running the whole thing. And it's the same thing in this. It's like, oh, the bad guys are the Narcolombians running it. Not the guy who's financing it, not the guy who's sitting in his office building that Shiger delivers the money to in Dallas, right? Um, anyway, the boys on the tracks witnessed. This is a real story that they allegedly um, they witnessed this thing, and and then the next day they found them, and they had OD'd on marijuana and laid down on some train tracks and been run over by the train. Right, is what the official story said. And the mom was like, "There is no way in hell this happens." Anybody with any brain was like, first of all, that's never happened ever, right, in the history of that. And second of all, let's see the autopsy. And then they refused it, they hid it, and then years later, the bodies were exhumed, and it turns out that the guy, the doctor, the DOCTOR, sorry, who did the procedure, had done all of these shady ones that were connected with this, and that they had like shotgun blasts. They'd been beaten, they'd been stabbed like 78 times, and it's because they witnessed this. And that's that. I feel I can't help but draw a connection with that because that's with this book. Because when the two boys witness Shiger, Sheriff Bell goes to them and is like, "You need to hide because now you've been associated with this, and something's going to happen to you." Right? Um, and let's see what else. Oh, back to this woman. Yeah. So what the Coen brothers do really well is they have these like background characters who are other otherworldly characters. And when Shiger goes to her in the motel and says, give me the hotel room, give me the hotel room. I can't really do a good impersonation of him. And she's like, I told you, he's down the. I told you we don't have that kind of information. And she's like not putting up with his shit. And he's totally put off with this, and he gives her this look, and it's like, damn, okay, somebody gave it to him. And then the other guy is this guy who I always think is listen, I'm Wilford Brimley and I have diabetes. Okay, but that's not Wilford Brimley. But look at this guy, man. This guy is so awesome. This guy looks like Mount Rushmore or something, right? He's just total Craggle Rock. I mean, this guy's just like, he was there in the Spanish-American War or whatever. And in the movie, he's supposed to be like the brother of Tommy Lee Jones, but in the book, he's the uncle. And he basically says he's kind of the flip side of the coin of the apocalyptic vision that I was talking about in my thesis statement of this book, which is he's saying, look, it's all meant nothing. Nothing means anything. But look at his face. He's completely miserable. At least Tommy Lee Jones is like, no, it means something. It means we're just in this pre-apocalyptic state in the world and in the country where everything's going to shit, and I'm, going to do the best that I can. And I go to church and I pray and I believe in God. And I'm trying to catch this Shiger character, but I can't help but feel like that, be aware and understand the fact that, this guy might come after me. And one thing that I don't think is in the movie that that is in the book is the fact that Tommy Lee Jones's character. So we have Woody Harrelson, who is a former Green Beret. Then we have Josh Brolin, who is a 12th Infantry Nam 2-tour Army Scout Sniper. But we also have Tommy Lee Jones, who is the sheriff, who it says in the book was awarded the Bronze Star in World War II, but he reveals to his uncle, that Cragley guy, that what actually happened was in the battle when they were defending a position in France from the NOTSEES, he loaded up a tripod and he suppressed, he put down suppressing fire and he shot a bunch of them. But then that night he realized that they were just going to grenade him and they were going to kill him and his unit. So he he skedaddled. He ran off and he left his men and they died. And so the rest of his life, he has been trying to come to terms with the fact that he escaped. And the uncle says, well, there's nothing you could do, right? Because this guy believes in nothing. And Tommy Lee Jones is regretful for this. And he feels like he has to make up for it somehow. But it's interesting because the scene where he, because he is going after Shigur, but he's also hyper aware. Like there's a scene where he, after Josh Brolin has been killed in the motel, Tommy Lee Jones shows up, and then that night, in this otherworldly hellscape, the two opposite sides, these two night crawlers, show up at the motel. First, Shigur shows up and tries to do his like inhabiting Stanislavski thing, where he goes in and he tries to figure out where the money is by, inhabiting the spirits of these people. And then he sees the headlights, and Tommy Lee Jones shows up. Tommy Lee Jones walks in, and senses. In the book, it talks about how he could feel that he was being watched. How did he know he was being watched? He could just tell. And so he backs out. And he lives. He also is one of the people that is in the same room with Shigur, and he lives. So he sort of mimics what he did in World War II when he left, except for this time he comes back with backup, and they're going to get Shigur, but at that point the ghost has sort of departed and left. Let's check these. Let's see if did we get any super chats, you guys? Oh yeah, we did. Let's check them real quick. And listen, shouts out to, we've had it's a busy night here in our corner of the internet. We had David Patrick Carey, Church of the Eternal Logos, doing his sponsor stream right before this. Then we had our Jethro stream, which is right now. Then we've got, let's see, I guess probably Jamie, and shouts out to Jamie Henshaw, Jamie and Rachel, based homeschool mom. Their premiere is right now. They're talking about Britney Spears. So once we get off here, we're going to go over there and check that out. Hopefully it's still going, because nobody can talk about this stuff like, especially Monarch and Monarch programming and celebrity, like Jamie and Rachel, based homeschool mom, who is a fantastic researcher, the best. Check out her Substack. And of course, everybody here, I'm sure, is already subbed to Jamie and her Out of This World podcast, Jamie Henshaw. And so we're going to check that out. And then I think JD is on with Clyde Bell tonight. So that'll be cool. Also, you guys, Jay's next event is September 3rd in Orlando. I'm really, I'm hoping to go to that. I mean, it's really soon, and I think it's Labor Day weekend. So I don't know if you guys are planning on going, but that would be I would be super stoked to go to that. Of course, I couldn't go to the last one because of the car and all that stuff. But hopefully I'll be able to make it, and maybe we can all hang out. Let's see. David Franco sends $5 in Venmo, and he says, Shigur seems to be the embodiment of Darwinian philosophy. Do you think he is a braver Raskolnikov? He doesn't seek salvation, but he destroys anyone who gets in his way. He is the only true atheist. Interesting point. And I think that, yes, I think that that's a valid statement and interpretation of Shigur. My interpretation is different. I think that he is a sort of a social Darwinist, in the sense that he is like the apex he's the, like they always say, the prototypical apex predator. Sort of shark swimming in this sea in this dark, sort of dismal abyss of other creatures. However, I don't think that it is that, I don't want to say simple, but I think that there is a metaphysical element to this that overrides all of that. I don't think that he is pure, atheism. I think he is spiritual. I think that he is a demon. And I don't know if I think that he is literally a demon in the text, even though there's indications in the language that he is. I mean, there's no. I don't want to. I don't. I hate to define things by what they are not. Okay, so I don't want to say that there's no reason to think that he isn't. Okay, if that makes sense. But I think that the language is such that he takes on. I mean, he specifically stated in that one part how he wants to mimic God, right? And what more of a Luciferian statement can there be than one who wants to invert God's order by mimicking, by inversion, by mimicking, and by by imitation, and then destruction and obliteration. Does that make sense? So I think that there's a metaphysical element to this. That's a really good question, though. And I don't think that he wants to necessarily destroy anyone who gets in his way. He does because people are useful to him, and I suppose that they're not in his way. But it's simply in his line of, in his sort of spiritual code. Because remember, there's also a part where Woody Harrelson's character says he lives by a set of principles, right? And how can one be? Maybe I'm not explaining this right. But how can one be a purely like sort of pseudoscientific Darwinian empiricist if one has principles? Why would there be principles? Aren't principles metaphysical? I don't know. You guys tell me. But that's a great question. Let's see. We've got, let's see, $3 on PayPal from Alan McIntyre. Thank you so much for supporting me, homeboy. Appreciate you. Maddie sent me $8. And let's see, he DM'd me a random question on Instagram, so let's check that out. Are you guys enjoying this? I know it's probably verbose as usual. Let's see. Yeah, Maddie, Real Cooter Brown says, random comment. But one thing I always found interesting is that in the movie adaptation, Anton's haircut very closely resembles a haircut that Anton Newcomb from the band the Brian Jonestown Massacre used to have. There's probably not any connection, but things like always make me wonder about where filmmakers get inspiration from. That's so funny that you bring up Anton Newcomb, because whenever I hear the name Anton, I thought it would have been too sort of esoteric for me to bring up in the stream. So I can't believe. So, of course, Real Cooter Brown knows about the Brian Jonestown Massacre, but I always think of Anton Newcomb when I think of Anton. I saw Brian Jonestown Massacre in concert in 2006 at my students' union in Belfast. And it was, I got to say, it was probably the best concert I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of concerts, and it was amazing. They played for like 3.5 hours. It was awesome. It was after they'd done, not Methadrone. They'd come out with, I forget what album it was, but they were amazing. But yeah, I don't know. It is interesting, his haircut. I think that, I don't know what, honestly, I can't answer like what their actual inspiration is, or what the costumier's inspiration was for the haircut. But I think that I would say my interpretation would be that, especially in light of 1980 post hippie, post hippie era going into the 80s, I think it's like the sort of haircut where it's like, oh, we're gonna give this guy a haircut where it's like he fits in and he's hip, but there's something off about him, and he's 12 years too late. It's like a mop top, but 12 years too late. Does that make sense? Yeah. Also, what was I gonna say about his hair? What was the other thing I was about to bring out a copy of? I've got a copy of the Brian Jonestown Massacre movie Dig in there. If you guys haven't seen that, it's one of the best. It's one of the best rock movie documentaries I've seen. It's so good. It's called Dig, D-I-G. Really good. It's about Brian Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols on tour in the 2000s. Pretty good. Really crazy. Yeah, I think it's just a sense of. I mean, it reminds me of. You remember that scene in Taxi Driver where Travis Bickle's standing there and and he's standing there with Harvey Keitel and he's like, "You know Iris?" And he's like, "No, I don't know Iris. I don't know no Iris." And he's like, "What are you, a fucking cowboy or something?" And he's like, "I'm hip. I'm hip." You know, it's like again, he's like wearing the shell, the mortal coil of the human being, but it's not quite right. Something is off. And of course, in that one, later he has the mohawk, right? So he chooses the, what is it, the 81st or 101st Airborne, World War II Mohican, warrior mohawk, right? Because he's gonna monarch Palatine, right? But before that, he's got this weird sort of Nam era crew cut. Remember, I think it was JD that pointed out that his Travis Bickle's jacket has a Phoenix program emblem on it. It might have been I think it was JD. And that would make sense in Taxi Driver because, right, one day a real rain will come and wash the scum off the streets. He just wants to eliminate everybody in this sort of programmed in this programmed destructo mode, destructo MK Omega mode. Remember he tries to off himself at the end. That's a good question. I mean, the haircut is everyone remembers the haircut from this movie. It's so garish and so blatant. What a particular stroke of genius branding for the film, right? All you had to do to sell this film was say, look at this guy and look at his haircut. I got to see this movie. Did you guys see this movie when it came out? I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I just remember it's so different from the other Coen Brothers movies, right? And we barely even scratched the surface of, vote Palatine, says Jason. We've barely even scratched the surface of any of the other Coen Brothers movies. One thing I mentioned earlier that I was going to bring up was Big Lebowski and how it occurred to me. I don't know if maybe I got this from somewhere else and I'm remembering it in the recesses of the halls of my mind palace or something, or maybe it's an original thought. I don't know, but that the Big Lebowski, in a sense, is sort of Beckett waiting for Godot for the sort of pre-war on terror, post Cold War malaise of the late 90s, pre-millennium, because it's essentially like the dude and Walter are like Vladimir and Estragon, and they are waiting for events that never come, and nothing changes, and sort of nothing really means anything in their world. And of course, this is, like I was saying at the beginning, like the flip side of the absurdist coin, right? You get the Ionesco rhinoceros, the playwright Ionesco and his rhinoceros play Absurdism, 20th century absurdism, updated to the Big Lebowski, where it's like the juxtaposition of events, which creates funny situations, right? And it's like the things are so absurd that they're funny, and that's cool, and that's like the comedic side. But then the tragic side is the absurdism of like Burn After Reading, where there's death and destruction, and it's at the hands of the military intelligence and the sort of American apparatus, and people lose their lives, and it doesn't matter, right? And then superseding all that, of course, going back to my thesis statement for No Country for Old Men, is that This is something completely different, right? Call it, call it. Is it absurdist or apocalyptic? And it's interesting that at the end of the book sort of vindicates my thesis because Bell specifically mentions Revelation, right? And how, nothing's going to stop this train except the second coming of Christ, right? Only God is going to save you, and there's a spiritual sickness in America, and it's not politics, right? I mean, it is politics. That's a symptom of it, or an arm, but the politics are certainly not going to save you, right? Let's see. The final scene in this book is just like in Blood Meridian, because he has a dream, and he says, the last paragraph, he says, Bell's dreaming about his dad. Bell lives, and he's dreaming about his dad, and he says, he just rode on past, and he had this blanket wrapped around him, and he had his head down, and when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and that he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. And then I woke up. In other words, he's saying that, this is just like in Blood Meridian in the postscript, right? Because it talks about how the Judge Holden, is somewhere out there in the plains, and he sees him, the speaker in the book sees him like digging holes into the earth and planting fires. And that of course, in that book is supposed to be how the demiurge is, sparking the Promethean satanic fire of this sort of new Eden, right? But in this, I think it's what he's saying is that in the cold and darkness of the world, he sees hope on the horizon. It's interesting that he sees it. It is interesting that he uses the horn and the moon color, right? Because I think that he's sort of, in a way, we are getting this Gnostic sense of, this sort of Gnostic worldview again of a new eon. I mean, it's no accident that the title, we haven't discussed this yet. I put the link in the channel in the video description, that the title of the book and the film comes from the Yeats poem "Sailing to Byzantium," right? Which has the famous line "Soul clap," right? This is no country for old men, because in that the speaker is talking about essentially transcendence and illumination through Sophia, through Sophia after the destruction of the world. So again, it's this sort of Gnostic worldview. But I think that's an interesting interpretation. So anyway, what did you guys think? You sandbagged him, man. You sandbagged him. We haven't talked about. There's so many Coen Brothers movies. One that I think deserves an analysis would be the Hudsucker Proxy. It's probably an underrated film. I mean, I've seen it once or twice, a couple times. It's got Tim Robbins in it, but it's got Paul Newman, and that is like about the corporate state, right? It's a satire on the corporate state. The Coen Brothers have done some stinkers. I mean, the Lady Killers, right? Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I feel like has been sort of interpreted and analyzed a lot. Obviously the Odyssean, Homeric elements of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But I'd be interested to go back and look at it again after all these years and see if there's a new interpretation. I'm sure there's a completely different interpretation that we could see for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Raising Arizona, I would leave that, of course, to JD. That's Nick Cage territory. What else? Miller's Crossing. I've never really been a fan of Miller's Crossing. Uh, you broke my heart. I've never really been a fan of that one. What else? Coen Brothers. There's so many Coen Brothers. So we'll have to go back, and I hope that met or was sort of up to par for our stream sponsor, Jethro. Shouts out to Jethro. Everybody go follow Homeboy Jethro over on Instagram. Our good buddy, our friend, our Kang out there, Mod, and my good friend. If you want to sponsor a stream, you want me to do a deep dive into a book or film analysis, don't forget you can always drop me super chats at any time. If you want me to do a music lyrics analysis, drop me $20 and I will look at it, as long as it's appropriate meaning up to my what I decide is appropriate for the channel, really. Then yeah, drop me $20 on there and I will look at it and we'll spend some time on it. We've got many more music analyses coming up. Oh, Fargo. Yeah, Fargo would be a great one. Barton Fink. If you want me to think about any more book analyses, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and please make sure you like and share and hit that sub button, you guys. We've climbed up in subs. Thanks especially to our homeboys, Jay over at Jay's Analysis, who shared me on Instagram and shared the stream on Instagram, and of course, thanks to David Patrick Carey over at Church of the Eternal Logos, who I called into in his awesome call-in stream yesterday. The next literary analysis, lit analysis, basement breathalyzing analysis we're going to do, I can tell you right now, will be Don DeLeo's White Noise, which I've been looking forward to and talking about for a long time. We're going to be doing that. Please check out my recent Snow Crash, Neil Stevenson analysis. Oh, and one more thing. Yeah, I forgot. I was watching Jay's analysis last night of The Spy Who Came in from the Cold and the spy films, and I forgot that, you know, there's in the sort of Fritz Springmeier MK Beta Sex Kitten MK Ultra Monarch programming. Of course, we have used by Soviets and by Americans by the intelligence state in general. We have the Sparrow, right? You should check out that movie Red Sparrow, you guys, if you haven't seen that. That's a good one. Also, what's the other one? Anna by Luc Besson. That's a really good one. That's an underrated one about a sparrow. But the opposite of that, the male version, is called a raven, and that ties in with Snow Crash because, of course, remember that the one of the guys in that, one of the main characters, is named Raven, and I totally forgot about that in the analysis. So that was pretty cool. Good example of intertextuality. So yes, so please make sure you help me get those subs up. We're trying to get up to 1,000, and we'll be doing that Don DeLeo stream soon. Again, thank you to Jethro for sponsoring the stream. And thank you, everybody, for supporting me. Thank you to Jack for dropping that $20. Thank you to Jethro for supporting me. Thank you to Block Party, Blockski, my homeboy out there, for supporting me for all the stuff that I've been going through, all that stuff over the past little while now. Thank you to my homeboys, OK, Jerry, Mixkey. Thank you to Mixkey for supporting me. Thank you to all of my friends, Maddie, Real Cooter Brown, Kim, Ellie, Based Homeschool Mom. Shouts out to everybody out there, Kristen, Slow Boy Whiteboard, and all my friends, all my homies, and appreciate you, everybody out there, and hope you had fun with this one. That was No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. And we will be back later with some more. Okay? Thanks, y'all. Love y'all. Peace.